been tuning in 2020, and I have to say this is a slightly less stressful experience having to rely on someone else's Wi-Fi rather than my own or the dog barging in. My name is Katie Bowden and I am the Director of Commercial for Global's audio business, looking after both their traditional radio business and our digital audio proposition. So I was thinking last weekend about what I might talk about today, because it's been a really unique time in commercial radio. We've had record audiences. I can remember in the first few weeks of lockdown, we were having up to 43% increase in reach across our brands such as LBC. But of course, for many of us, we have been working in one of the hardest economic downturns than we've ever experienced. And as I walked down my local high street, I was met with a sea of to let signs, and it really dawned on me the enormity of what we have all lived through. And as I turned the corner, I was met with a slightly more worrying sight where a local DIY shop, which I've known for my whole life, was completely boarded up. I quickly rushed across the road to see what had happened, because there was a small note in the window. And it read, "Please don't worry, we've expanded and taken on the shop next door. Use the next entrance." So while there are many sad COVID stories, it has also been a reset for many of us. And the decisions that we thought were years off have been fast-tracked. For UK radio, I really feel like there has been a serendipity in the crisis, and that is what I want to talk to you about today. I've been fortunate enough to be at the front line of commercial radio, and I've certainly seen a whole bunch of trends that have happened across this period. So trend number one, we all became more human, and so did our advertisers. I've often spoken about the fact that COVID has been an amazing people leveller. Wherever you were in the first few weeks of lockdown, all of us had one thing in common. And I think what that led to was us to be more empathetic, and we certainly saw that in the advertising fraternity as well. And I think with radio, it's always been a one-to-one channel. We are a human medium, that's how we've always been. And I think the smartest of radio advertisers have always really locked into this. They've really thought about the tone of how they speak to our audience. And I think this was one of the trends that we really started to see coming through in the first few weeks of lockdown. And grocery retail was probably the first category to really shift on this. I think after the initial shockwave of lockdown and COVID, as it really did arrive in our country, I think advertisers were put into a really difficult situation. If we do advertise, how do we advertise? And if we advertise, how do we actually speak to the audience? And I think for grocery retail, there was a really interesting opportunity. For them, they wanted to reassure their customer base. They wanted to reassure that the stocks were fully shelved, that they would be safe in store. And I think radio advertising started to play a really interesting role for grocery advertisers. And Tesco were one of the first to move into this space. And I think what was interesting is this traditional response-led category was suddenly much more in a brand space. And there was some interesting research that was carried out specifically for this category by Vetrionic. Now, they are an audio intelligence platform that uses machine learning to understand how an ad is performing. And what was interesting is during this period, from the 6 top grocery retailers that were advertising in this time, they performed above all previous benchmarks. The research indicated that the ads were deemed more authentic, more trustworthy and reliable by listeners, and Tesco came out top. But it also allowed some of the bigger radio partners, such as eBay, to really think about how they connected with our audience in different ways. And one of the most memorable stories that I can remember from the first couple of weeks of lockdown is when eBay sent a replacement bike to an NHS nurse who'd had it stolen in the first few weeks of lockdown. Now, this was in direct response to a story that actually happened on air. And while it's really simple in its activation, it was a really wonderful moment and certainly a human way to react. And brands such as Nescafe also linked into radio's ability to connect. Over 1 in 5 people reported experiencing either feeling lonely or isolated during lockdown. And for Nescafe, they saw an opportunity in this. How could they, as a brand, really allow people to connect? And what was quite a simple idea, so a virtual coffee moment, so we'd bring people live on air, we'd connect them to loved ones that they had missed, created absolutely lovely content, but really, again, linked into that ability for radio to connect with an audience. In fact, as Global, we loved this idea so much, we decided to take it internal, and we actually did this with our staff right the way through lockdown. But for this specific piece of activity, we saw over 4,500 different messages come into the station, which again was far beyond any other benchmark that we'd previously seen. And again, I'm sure this is a quote many of you have seen, but this is certainly trend number 2 for us. Adaptability is the simple secret of survival. And that's something, as radio brands, we've always been really, really good at. So if you look at the first 24 hours of lockdown for us, and here are a few images of our presenters, we were able to very quickly, in a short space of time, take every single show out of the studio and in home with our presenters. And I think this positioned us really, really uniquely for advertisers, and we started to see advertisers taking advantage of this more. Of course, things such as TV shoots were really, really challenged in the first few weeks of lockdown. And I think that advertisers were put into a space where they had to really think about how they could even produce assets, but also assets that would connect. And this is something that we did a lot more of in the first few months of lockdown. I think talking to Jo McCrosty, who looks after all of our creative output at Global, she saw over 150% increase just in the assets that we were producing for advertisers during this period. But when you look at the advertisers and the categories that actually took advantage of this, we saw some really different patterns. So what you can see here are the categories that led for us, and this was specifically right in the heart of lockdown. And the percentage that you can see underneath is actually the share of voice that they had during this period. Now, there's some obvious categories on here. I'm sure you can understand why government was so heavily advertising during this period. But what was interesting for us were categories such as finance. Now, finance had traditionally underutilised radio. It hasn't ever really been a huge category for us. But for them, they were really challenged. They saw this huge increase in fraudulent activity. They obviously had to promote to consumers over how to use their digital products. So they started to really tap into radio to use that as a voice to their consumers to both reassure and advertise their different products. And back in May, in the previous Tuning In conference, our commercial strategy director actually came here to talk about the opportunity in FMCG specifically. Now, this is a category we've often done a lot of work in, but again, it has been quite underinvested in by a lot of the significant brands in this space. We've often highlighted the strengths of radio to deliver visibility on shelf through to purchase intent. And what we had during lockdown was this real opportunity to re-engage brands around how they might use radio during this time. And this is a snapshot of some of the new brands that we've seen come across, right across the board with commercial radio across both July, August and into September. In fact, in the food category alone, we've seen over 160% year-on-year growth. And that is, of course, in a declining market. And I think for anyone working in media during this period will really understand what this trend means, because I think that for all of us, we're working in a changing world and we had to consistently think about how you might adapt and respond to that. And back at Global, we ran weekly listener panel insight to really understand this. And what we started to see, particularly coming into May, was a real shift in how the nation was feeling. We were moving out of this high fear state into one where we wanted more laughter, more connection, more positivity. And of course, that provided a slightly different opportunity for how advertisers might engage with our audience. Now, one example that I want to share here shortly is, of course, around what on earth do you do when you can't have a live event space. For Global, we have two huge events that happen across the year, both the Summertime Ball and the Jingle Bell Ball. And we've always worked very closely with our headline partners around this. But to show you how we adapted this, I just want to play you a short video of how we brought to life the Summertime Ball with our headline sponsor, Barclaycard.
great to see you enjoying the show.
We spent the day today making a merch stand.
New Zealand gone international, guys.
The best of Capital's Summertime Ball with Barclaycard.
So the final trend that I wanted to talk to you about today, so trend number 4, and I'm sure we can all relate this to the silly moments that we've had in our front lounge from contributing to a variety of quizzes. I can tell you that now that doing a Mars bar eating competition is a terrible idea because someone did actually choke very badly when we tried that. But I think for advertisers, it also offered a time to really think about how they might connect with audiences in a lighter-hearted way. So the next example that I wanted to talk to you about is, again, a category that's not huge for us, online dating. And also a lot of people said, well, you know, what's the relevance of people still dating during this period? Well, they were just doing it virtually. So the clip I'm about to play you here is just a really fun activation of how we brought that to life on Capital.
Okay, guys, here's my question, right? Because this is what I was thinking. How can you flirt with someone and sort of show that you like them without the body language? Because you're over video. Like, normally it'd be like the old hand on the knee, or you maybe shuffle a bit closer to them, wouldn't you?
Okay, so Tom, we'll go for you. What's your dating advice?
Well, virtually, I have a 3-pronged fork. I call it the 3 eyes. It's indication, invitation, and initiation. The indication demonstrates you're interested by sustaining eye contact a nanosecond longer before you seductively blink. Oh. Invitation is doing something to yourself that you'd like them to do to you post-lockdown, like caressing the clavicle or, at a pinch, stroking the mastoid. And then initiation is when you confirm all of the clues by doing something real. So you pay them a compliment.
Now, I do just have to say,
yeah, please.
The mastoid is on your face.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the other one was your shoulder.
Yeah, the other one was your shoulder.
Or your collarbone.
Yeah.
So from online dating to probably my favourite campaign that came out of lockdown, from Just Eat. And as the public started to look forward to a semblance of normality, Just Eat was seeking to add some much-needed humour to the mix with the launch of their new global campaign, Did Somebody Say Just Eat with Snoop Dogg? And I really feel like they timed this absolutely perfectly for how the nation were feeling at that time. And I'm going to play you an audio clip now to show you how they launched that on radio.
Did somebody say just eat?
Right, guys, if you could eat any food right now, what would it be?
Spicy Mexican for me.
Pizza, cheese, all the toppings, barbecue sauce. Oh, I'm so hungry now, actually.
Ooh, did somebody say?
Just eat.
Ooh,
That's pretty good, wasn't it?
That was good.
Oh.
Well, listen, speaking of Just Eat, actually, guess who has rewritten their new track?
What?
Who?
Only the entertainment icon, Snoop Dogg.
Oh, my word.
What? No way. I love this.
It's so sick. Here, have a listen.
Did somebody say just...
Sick of this. We're gonna do this doggy style.
Did somebody say just eat?
Me, get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib.
So these are my 4 learnings from lockdown from the front line of commercial radio. For me, the strengths of radio have always been here. Flexibility, big audiences, and it's really accessible to both brands and listeners. It feels like there's a serendipity in the crisis that has given us the opportunity to showcase the medium. And while there is still uncertainty ahead, I truly believe that radio brands will play a vital role in helping us to rebuild the economy. Thank you.